individual. He said, you know, I don't know where Jamestown is. I have no idea where Chautauqua County is. But he said, I got my PhD in modern American history. In that 10-year period, the 1930s and 1940s, he's one of the people I would count on two hands that made all the difference in America. I wish you luck. He wanted us to succeed. And he also sent us to some other people to get ideas on how we might build this institution to be something great. What do? Our mission. First of all, we're doing archiving, and we're doing history. These gentlemen that were here today will be a part of our archives. The people that knew Jackson, the people that worked with him, the people that, understood where he was coming from, that can give us perspective. We also believe we'll be a center of people who want to know who this man was when he lived in this area for a lot of his life as a practicing attorney. And so one of our jobs, we believe, is to do that, and to preserve it, and to take artifacts, papers, photographs, gentlemen listening to all this, whatever you might have about Robert Jackson, you want to make sure is well taken care of. We're going to be doing that. Secondly, the person that helped us get started, Carl Kappa, when asked by Greg Peterson, who's a local history nut here in the area, Carl, who is your role model? And Greg thought he might say Yogi Berra or somebody like that. Carl was a very successful businessman. He said, my parents brought me up to and taught me that if we all were like this man, Robert Jackson, the world would be a better place. And he says, I don't think Jamestown's ever recognized that, and I don't think the kids in Jamestown going to school understand that, so I want to make sure you're involved in education. And so we are, and I would describe our educational program basically as this: event-based education. Greg Peterson loves to put on events, and sometimes we put on events that bring the law alive. We had a gentleman here a year ago by the name of Fred Korematsu, who was a Japanese-American sent to one of our detainee camps on the West Coast during the war. His case went all the way to the Supreme Court. He lost, but a man by the name of Robert Jackson dissented in his favor. He came here. We had 300 or 400 students from the public schools, 60 law students from UB Law School, and that's what we mean about event-based education. We think it brings the law to life. Next year, we're bringing in, at the 50th anniversary of Brown versus the Board of Education, the two sisters of daughters of Oliver Brown, who were the ones that got turned away from the school in Topeka, Kansas because they were black. And this is a required reading in our public schools. We're going to make a statewide one out of this. I'm going to go down to the New York Bar Association meeting in 2 weeks. They're going to help us network statewide on our website, on a distance learning channel between the public schools. And we believe that this is the kind of educational program that can bring the law to life. I remember George Niebank this morning saying that his bottom line relative to Robert H.Jackson was that he believed that the law was the fabric that held us together, held our society together, that held civilization together. We can take various aspects of what he did, but he really was a great, great believer in the law, and you could not have liberty without the law. And we want to try and convey this to different age groups, to different student levels, in a way they can understand it, and we think that's a part of our mission. We also have a mission to advance his legacy. What does that mean? We're struggling with that, but he himself thought that Nuremberg may have been his greatest contribution to humankind, and we are working in that area to try and find ways that we can advance what he felt and thought about international law as it applied to war crimes, crimes against humanity, and so forth. A lot of these terms weren't really defined until Jackson came along in an appropriate way. And he laid tremendous groundwork in this area. We have a building down in Jamestown. You ought to stop and see us sometime. It's a wonderful 1859 mansion. We've worked to fix it up and make it a beautiful place. But we are more than a building. We want to be an idea place. We want to be a place where it advances this man's legacy. He came, from this area. We're a backwater out here in western New York. We're up here in the hills. People don't know we're here. But he came from here. And he went to the top of his profession, and he went to the top of the leadership in the law in this country and on an international level. And we're hoping that maybe the Robert Jackson Center can take that same approach. Yeah, we're still a backwater. This is a lot like you've seen here 50, 60, 80 years ago as you drive through this county. But we're thinking big, and we think that what he stood for is very important. Sandra Day O'Connor has been here to speak at Chautauqua. And in 1995, way before there was a Robert Jackson Center, she came down to Jamestown and stood on a hot summer day out on the corner of 8th and Main Street and dedicated a statue, a bronze sculpture of Robert H.Jackson. And she talked primarily about his work at Nuremberg, and she said that there were members of the court that didn't agree with it, he shouldn't have gone, da-da-da, it was controversial. But then at the end of her talk, she said, you know, today, as she stood there in 1995, we're talking about tribunals for Rwanda, for Bosnia-Herzegovina. And she said, we are traveling the path beaten by Robert Jackson for the advancement of basic human rights. And so I guess if you got to the bottom line of what motivates us that work there and are involved, is that maybe as we move along, this will be a place where we can make one small step down the road to what Robert Jackson, I think, envisioned for the world, and we would appreciate at any time your advice and your support. Thank you very much.
Jeffrey, hey!
That was security.
Terrific! Terrific!